Hello, everyone. Are we live? Do you see us?
Hello. I think we're so perfectly on time, Trisha. But
No,
we can't
Sandra's
believe it.
here. Hello, Sandra. I see Sandra over here. Welcome, everyone. For those of you joining us, hello. Welcome to Tricky Thursday Live. We do this once a month. This is my partner in crime, Shelotta of Shelotta Pattern Cutting School. You can see her if you're on my channel. You can see her link down below to her channel because we are both streaming on the same channel. If you could do us a huge favor and push the like button if you're seeing us, because that helps us get the word out to everyone else and helps the algorithm. Hello, that is Maya or Maya. Yeah, Maya. Sorry, I have Maya and Mira, and Maya is the one here.
Yes, I've got a few. I've got a Leah as well.
Plus, I've been going through PatternCon class, and we have like 4 Dianes and 5 Loris, all spelled different ways, and I think we have 3 Tanisha. So anyway, and Maya and Mira are both coming.
In my chat. Hello,
Hi,
Rebecca,
Allison. Good to see you. Hello, Pam.
Victor and Lisa. And can you do me as another favor? So we would love a thumbs up, but can you also tell us whether our sound is balanced?
Yes.
Because sometimes one of us is louder, and we can fix it if we know it, please.
Yeah.
Oh, Trisha, can you see little crowns in the chat now?
Yes. So you guys are top contributors. Hi, Sue.
Yes. So I've got all my lovely. I've got Laura. Hello, Lisa. Hello, Victor, and hello, Rebecca. And they all got little crowns, which is lovely.
Yes. I wonder, can you guys see the crowns? That's interesting.
I don't know.
So
yes, you can.
They can. Oh, because you have your YouTube open. Sound is good. Yes. Okay, cool. Sounds good over here. Says Sue.
And my sound is good as well. So that's a great start.
We figured it out.
I think last time we had our sewing tips which don't work, and our whole sound was messed up, or something happened, didn't it? It was a complete debacle.
And so especially with astrology these days, I'm just like, let's just technology. Yes. I hope it works. Anyway, so today, before we introduce ourselves, which we will in a second, but today we're going to be talking about shortcuts that work and will help you, and shortcuts that don't work and you should avoid and could cause more pain. We thought that would be a fun thing to share with you guys today, and it's something that, Shelotta and I both have been sewing and pattern cutting for a long time, so we have things that work for us. I don't know about you, Shelotta, but whenever I'm teaching, I guess we should go into introductions talking about what we do. But anyway, whenever I'm teaching, I'm have to be intentional about not sharing certain shortcuts, because I imagine that everyone's going to shortcut my shortcuts, and then that could be even worse.
Yeah, I did the tutorial recently on my website, and I said, yeah, this is the proper method, and now I'm going to show you how you can really fudge it. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So quick introduction. My name is Trisha. I call myself your pattern nerd friend because I love all things pattern making. I come from a background working in theater with big live entertainment. My clients included Disney, Blue Man Group, Cirque du Soleil, Broadway shows like Jersey Boys. And now I mainly focus on teaching and sharing what I learned over those years working professionally for over 20 years, so that you can harness this power of pattern making and making clothes for yourself or for your clients, or even making costumes. We have some people who love that as well. And I have an online membership, plus I am hosting the first ever PatternCon event, which happens in less than a month. Less than a month. So yeah, we're all about pattern nerds here. And once a month I get together with my friend Shelotta, who is also a lover of pattern cutting, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hello, my lovely people. So I'm Shelotta. Unlike Trisha, I do not come from costumes. I'm a pure fashion designer who fell in love with pattern cutting, because when you can actually make the clothes you design, which a lot of designers can't, and which fashion school Trisha knows as well, that often doesn't teach you. So like Trisha, I'm really passionate. My background is working both on the high street for German labels actually, and sort of high-end UK labels. But one of the things I always loved about pattern cutting and making your own clothes is it's so it's so sustainable, and especially working in fashion, it's like every season's so much gets wasted, even if it's expensive stuff. So that sort of really put me off working full-time as a designer anymore. And that's when I, like Trisha, now concentrate on teaching you the skills to make the clothes you want to wear. And you're also going to keep for years and remake, repair, treasure. They're going to fit you. You'll be able to amend them. I know Trisha's really big on that. But it's just actually clothes just fit you and you love, rather than like making to do with second best or spending a lot of money. So we both love sharing that skill. We make it fun as well, hopefully. That's what we both love.
Yes.
And you can both learn with us online, of course, and I teach now live in person, which I
Yeah, in
absolutely love
person.
as
That's
well.
right. You've been doing those in-person classes.
Yes, because my background is also teaching in the UK art school system for about 8-9 years. So now finally getting back to it after a 6-year break is absolutely amazing. Like talking with people in a room and all, but you know how you said you can't go shortcut. I actually love how people, because we're adults, how people do things differently.
Yes.
And like sometimes you learn things I had no idea about.
Yes.
So I always quite like that.
That's
I love these sort of getting
That's my
together.
favorite thing about getting together with people, with other people and sewing, is that there's so many different ways to do something. I always learn something. I went on a retreat, a sorority retreat. If you guys don't know about sorority wear, like SEW, it's a little hard to say, but it's kind of cute. They do these in-person retreats in Texas, and they also do several things online. It's all about community. We love community and sewing and all of those. But I went in person, and it was just so nice. It had been a while since I've really sewn with other people, and every time, when I would go on shows and things and open shows, I would be around stitchers and other things, and you'd always learn something, always. Hello to the newcomers, Concetta and Patterns by D. Hello, Miss D. And Victoria, I'm glad you now have your coffee. Oh, yes, and she's saying, Victoria's saying that's a really pretty dress behind you, Charlotta.
Oh, thank you. That's actually one of the shortcuts I wanted to share. And I've got some new people on my chat. So Helen, I'm going to call you Natalie, and Stephanie, and I think Kristen maybe even. But I've got new people. It's always nice when I've got my regulars, which I love, but it's nice to have some new people. So shall we dive straight into
let's dive right in.
Because
and before we get into that, though, we are going to be sharing what we have as tips, and what you should, things you should know about and you can try that'll make your sewing pattern cutting life easier, and things you shouldn't. But also, we want to hear from you. If this is your first time joining us, we love to hear from you. This is not us talking to you. We are all here together. So if you're here live with us, please, chat with us in the chat, share your opinions, ask your questions, share your tips and tricks that maybe we don't know about, because that's how we all learn from each other, right? So yeah, I just wanted to say that in case there were some people who are new.
We'd love to know your favorite shortcuts which work. And maybe you've tried something out which was disaster. I'd love to hear it as well.
Yes, for sure.
And hello, Stephanie. I'm looking forward to meeting you in September as well. So I've got one of my in-person students here as a preview, which is great. And yes, let us know in the chats whether you tried out our shortcuts and liked them or not, because I think a lot of stuff, that's why we both get on quite well, because I think we agree that things work for you might not work for others. There's no best methods, there's just a lot of very good methods. So I always think there's more to learn rather than to argue about whether you're right or not. So the first shortcut I wanted to share is really where to start. So we teach how to do your block, which you can do from a sewing pattern, or you can draft it to your measurements. And then the block is quite a great starting point, because it's just a basic template of your body. But often, if you drafted a few styles, or if you use quite a few sewing patterns as well, you already have like a whole collection of starting points. So this dress recently, I went to a wedding and I wanted just a really classic summer wedding dress. So I can be there to sort of fancy events. But rather than starting from my block, I started from a dress which had the same sort of detail, but less of it, which it's got like a paneling, which are basically darts stitched and then left open. So you get like some fitting, but a nice bit of volume. So I just amended it. I think the drafting took me 5 minutes rather than, starting from point, because I knew the dress was the right length. And then all I did, I changed the neckline. And that's another shortcut. You can, if you change your neckline, you can normally do it without having to worry too much, as long as you don't go too deep.
Yeah, because too close to the bust. Yeah.
Yes, you have to start contouring.
Yeah.
But if mine was like that, and I just made it a bit wider, so you have sort of, as long as you think you stay above here, and on your bust size dependent as well.
True.
But you have that's another shortcut. You can sort of change your neckline for a different design. And of course, if you make it really big, you just do a little bit of contouring. But that's possible as well. And I made the sleeve slightly grown on, which I'm not 100% sure the length yet, but it was good enough. But that brings me to the first thing I wouldn't mess around with. So if you have a sewing pattern or you're block adapting, often the sleeves aren't interchangeable, and your armhole.
Yeah.
So or for example, you can't just use a sewing pattern which has a narrow shoulder and put another sleeve on. That won't fit. So that's a shortcut you shouldn't do, because they are always designed together, so they're not interchangeable. So you can of course risk it might work, but that's a shortcut.
Well, I think it can be done, but there's more to it than that. You need to look at measurements and compare your arm's eye on the sleeve compared to the arm's eye on the bodice, and I think really what you're saying, using another pattern that you already used is definitely something that I use a lot too, is making sure that you're starting with a pattern that already has been fit. Like it's a tried and true. It's something that already fit, even if you want to change the style a little bit, because once you have a pattern that fits and you've taken the time to fit that pattern to you, then you can easily tweak the design to make it more what you want. I kind of did something similar with, I made this weekend at that retreat, I made a bathing suit, and then I made a yoga top and pants, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And I made the bathing suit top first because I do yoga more than I go swimming in a pool. So I was like, I'm going to get the fit right on the bathing suit. And it was a pattern that I purchased. And that way, when it came time to make my yoga top, it was really easy. And I just switched out the fabric. I did make the band a little bit longer on this yoga top. But I knew everything else was going to fit because I had already tested it out on the bathing suit. There's a couple.
It's sort of like, sorry?
There's a couple of comments in the chat. But,
no, I think it's sort of great because it's like, as you said, you have the fit already. And if you have a design you like, it's so much faster. And of course, if you have your own blocks and you know your sleeve measurement, you can swap sleeves around.
True.
But on sewing patterns, I wouldn't risk it.
Yeah, commercial patterns that you purchase. Yeah, for sure. Sue is saying, I have seen a couple of ways to put on collars. I don't have the details, but love the ease of putting them on. Thanks to Trisha, to me. I would say, one thing, and I actually gave this advice to one of the ladies who was sewing a collar. She was just doing a mandarin collar on her, and no, this doesn't have a collar either. I was trying to find something that I could show as an example. But instead of what I do with collars, especially mandarin collars, is a lot of times, you have the outside collar and the inside collar. And a lot of times they have you sew the outside collar on like this, and then you fold or whatever, and you stitch in the ditch. Or that is a lot hard to get clean, like stitching in the ditch. So what I do a lot of times is I sew the inside first, and then that way I can fold, and then I do an edge stitch, and it really doesn't matter as much if you're not exactly in the ditch on the inside, because nobody's going to be looking that close on the inside, and then you can make sure it looks really clean on the outside. So that's a quick tip for collars that I like.
I've seen, we actually just had discussion about standard mandarin collars in my live Q&A on the pattern cutting school, because somebody's making one, and there's lots of different methods, because you can also, for example, if you're facing, you could actually just have all your seam allowance. You don't have to finish. You just add
sandwich in the facing. Absolutely. Yeah, that's my favorite way. So but I'm saying, like, if you don't have a facing,
No, maybe
But
a
yeah.
friend. And but I've seen the last one I've seen. I only seen it on YouTube. I haven't tried it because I don't quite trust it. Is where they iron all the seam allowance over on the collar, so you literally have a finished collar, and then they insert the bodice and they just top stitch it.
Wait, say that again. How do you do
So
that?
they have a completely finished collar.
Uh-huh.
Actually, so you iron over all your seam allowance
Yeah.
on the outer and inner collar, and then you sort of slot it on top
Oh,
of your
like you
bodice,
put the bodice,
and then you literally just top
stitch
stitch it. And I get the idea, but it's really fast, and I think quite a lot of commercial
I just would be
patterns
worried
use
because
it.
of that curve. Sometimes that neck curve
Yeah.
is not so easy to
And
like
also
get it
that
in
you have
there.
exactly the same overlap all the way.
Then
Because
you're
that's
getting
why I
into
mentioned
that
the
whole
curve.
stitch in the ditch
Yeah.
thing, yeah. And then you're fighting.
I
I don't
wonder where
know.
they draw the stitch line on the bodice, and then you can line it up. But yeah, I think it's when you make like hundreds of shirts a day. That's
Sure,
when
you
you can
can
do
be
it.
that
Yeah.
accurate for sure. And that's the other thing to consider that just is it's not really a tip or something, but when you're comparing your home sewn or your homemade garments to things that you can purchase in the store ready to wear, you have to keep in mind that when we are sewing stuff at home and making it ourselves, or if you have a small line where you're doing everything yourself, you are doing everything. You're doing the pattern cutting, you're doing the fabric cutting, you're doing the prepping, you're sewing the collar on, you're sewing the bodice together, you're doing the finish work, you're doing the button, all of it. In a factory, there is one person who puts collars on, and that's all they do. So guess what? They get really good and really fast at it. So comparing your quality, like, oh, I'm really good at this part but not so good at this part, well, that's not typically how things are made. So be kind to yourself is what I'm trying to say. Like, own your mistakes, those little things. There are mistakes where you kind of, and that, I guess that could be a tip, is like, sometimes when I see a mistake, I'm like, do I care enough to redo that mistake? Or am I just going to know that's my hidden gem that I can prove I know where the bones are buried, kind of thing? Like asking your question, is that something that only I will ever know? Or if somebody's seeing my stitch line kind of going in and out on the inside of my collar, I'm going to kick them. Anyway.
Because there's a whole thing, going on with AI and everything being perfect and stuff. And that's why I think the whole sort of sewing is really human. It's something only we do at the moment.
Yeah.
And I love looking, because we love vintage as well, but I love looking at old clothes.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, oh yes, I went a little bit off there. Or that's an interesting way of doing the lining. I hadn't seen that.
Right.
But that's when you really connect with somebody who made this 60 years ago as another person. And I actually love these little, nowadays, I used to be like unpick and redo.
I kind of like it.
Yeah, and also when you look back every time you wear it, think, oh yeah, I went a little bit wrong. That's what makes it,
It makes it unique. It makes it handmade. It makes it special. Yeah. It proves that you're the one who did it. You know where those little tiny things that no one else. And I just want to say this before we get off this thread, because we do have more tips to share. But the other thing is, the majority of human beings on the planet do not sew and make things. And so the fact that you did, I don't care how many mistakes are on that, you're already way cooler than a lot of other people. So like, own that. And yeah, maybe the stitch is a little wobbly, or you didn't catch it all exactly perfect. Every single thing that I've ever made, I'm like, next time maybe I'll do this. Next time maybe I'll do that. Like, it's never perfect. Perfection is the procrastination in pretty shoes. We strive for progress, we strive for improvement, we strive for just having fun and enjoying the project. So that's something I always want to say. I have some people, Concetta says, not a shortcut, but I try to do my finishing as I go along rather than saving it for the end of the sewing order. Yeah. Ooh, that's a tip. You know what? I hate finishing. It's like, I'll make the whole thing and then I have a pair of jeans that are my favorite jeans that still don't have a center front button. I safety pin myself into them every time because I'm like, I just can't bring myself to, I don't know why. It's so dumb.
Yeah, but I have something where you like, because the shortcut, what you did at time works. So like, why change it? And actually I was going to agree with, what was her name? Concetta, lovely name.
Concetta, yeah.
I was going to agree that but nowadays, because I hate over finishing. So I actually nowadays, I know you I overlock, or I zigzag, or bind everything before I get started. And then
Yes,
it's really
yes.
fast.
And
isn't
that's
it?
something we do in theater too, is, we just overlock everything. And then you're just putting it together and everything is finished off. Or I try to be mindful of, like, if it's going to go into a lining and be finished off in that way, to not overlock, just for thickness wise. But yeah, I like to do that as well. So that's a great
totally.
tip.
That's nice about lining. You don't have to finish
Oh
everything.
yes, exactly. Lining is nice.
And I have got some tips about drafting, but before that, because we're talking about imperfections, and one of the things, like for example, if you're top stitching a neckline and you have a little wobble, you either leave the wobble or you unpick it. But like sometimes there's a shortcut which doesn't work. It's where you just, like, say you unpick from here to here and you top stitch that bit again.
Oh yeah.
And that's the shortcut, which just will stand out even more, because when you have reverse stitching, you got double thickness of stitching. And also, when you stitch them on go, you get like a really nice smoothness. If you have a start here, different section here, and a different section here, that's really going to stand out. So that's a shortcut which doesn't work.
Not so
basically
good.
Don't mess around with your mistake. You either own it, you put something on top to hide it, or you literally do the section where it belongs.
Yeah, the whole go, instead of just, that's true.
And I think there is, like this, I would unpick. If it's my back hem, I would just have a little wobble there.
So,
or when you don't catch the inside in doing a top stitching, sometimes I just hand stitch it, do like 2 little stitches.
Yeah, because sometimes I know who here is fan of hand stitching, because I get a lot of pushback whenever I say hand stitching. But you know what? Honestly, that can be a shortcut too, because sometimes you're trying to do everything on the sewing machine and you're going to try, and then it doesn't quite work, or you catch something funny, or you don't catch something funny. But sometimes hand stitching can be the faster method, because you're going to have more control. And here's one thing I love about hand stitching is, when we're sewing, we're obviously sitting in front of the sewing machine. I save my hand stitching for watching TV and socializing with other people. I don't have to be at the machine. I can do it wherever, So that's one thing.
I totally agree with you. I used to be, and I think it's also the thing is, I used to do so much sewing all the time, like several hours a day on the machine, and you get really good at you can just do about anything. And nowadays, I'm like you, now you teach and you work full time. It's like you don't get much time actually making stuff. And then you can often think, if I really concentrate the machine, I can do it. But it's actually faster to hand stitch. You got more control because you're doing it slower as you go along. And I like how you can do invisible finishes much faster than on the machine. Oh, and I've got I got people loving hand stitching, so that's great.
Yeah, and Gail says she's liking it more and more as she gets older. So there was,
and we have Kirsten is also agreeing with using a serger and finishing everything first before you make it. It's nice. It's either serger or zigzag stitch, as well. I like I like a zigzag stitch. It's again quite nostalgic, because any vintage garment,
I can't do that. That's how I used to do it before. I'll tell you just a little side story. So I learned on my mom's old Singer. It actually wasn't a Singer. It was like a Singer knockoff. But I had to finish with the zigzag stitch. And then I went to my grandmother's. She was always the one into sewing, and she had a serger. And I was like, what is this magical machine? And I was a kid still. So I was like, oh, when I get my machine, I'm definitely getting a serger. It was and I haven't gone back. I don't finish my seams. I either do a French seam, a lining, a facing, or a serge. I can't,
it's so fast as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's so clean, and I was just like, it's so nice, and it looks professional too. So Kathleen definitely loved the whole detachable, interchangeable vintage style collars. I think that's a great thing. I have just the collars just by themselves, which you can do, but you can also do snap on so that they don't move, and you can change out different colors. That's a really nice way to change up the style of something. Although I can't find my collars since I've moved to this house, and I've looked a couple of times. I'm kind of bummed about it. I need to make some more. Pam's asking, when you're making a mock-up of a swimsuit or closer fitting knitwear, do you use fabric similar to your finished fabric? Yes, absolutely. And I actually was making some swimwear and like this yoga. I'm swearing. I'm covered, I promise. So like this is the top, and the swimsuit was just a narrower band, and I did like, it's got like the straps in the back. It's super comfy. But I changed because I like to add in this, it's like a spacer fabric in the bust area, so it gives me a little bit more structure. And I did that on my bathing suit as well. So I changed the sewing order of how, and that's something I wanted to mention too.
Yes.
But you have to do something similar stretch wise. So because of my costume career, have lots of, I did a lot for Cirque du Soleil and circus style clothing. So we did a lot of stretch wear and that sort of material. So I have a lot. So my bathing suit that I just made is a sparkly red, which is not generally a fabric that I would wear, but to be fun for going to the pool or whatever. So I have a lot of flashy leftover fabric, and that's what I would do when I would buy for clients is, I never wanted to run out of fabric. So I would make sure, I was always mindful because of course that's money coming out, but I knew that any fabric that was left over I could use for mock-ups in the future. So I know it could be like an extra cost, but yeah, definitely when you're sewing tightly fit knitwear, you want to use at least a fabric. It doesn't have to be the exact same fabric, but with similar stretch ratio, because it will make a difference on your fit. And most of them
give you a stretch ratio, and they give you exact material in it, doesn't it? That's what I did when I did my I made some swimsuit and bikini as well.
Yeah.
And I just used something similar but cheaper.
And then and Sue says she's also been serging the edges. Game changer. Sometimes hand stitching can finish off a garment nicely. It's like that chef kiss at the end, going back to talking about finishing. And Addictive is saying, and that's Lauren, I admit I don't know a lot about hand stitching. I know the ladder stitch, and that's really it. Ladder stitch and slip stitch are probably my two favorite finishing hand stitches.
I need to look up. Is the ladder stitch you use for hand?
The ladder is where you go in and out, back and forth between the two fabrics. Yes. And then the slip stitch is probably my favorite because you travel in one fabric and then you just catch a tiny little bit of the other, and then you try, like when I'm sewing a label on or a patch or something like that. So it's almost invisible on the thing that you're adding, and you travel in the thing you're adding it to. But yeah.
No, it's one of those where because I learned in different language hand stitching. I have
I call it a slip stitch, but I think it has other names.
Hemming.
Is it blind hemming? See, blind hemming is different for me.
Yeah, I use two methods. I use the slip stitch, and I also do
the cross catch stitch.
Yeah, there's like one they use on traditional clothing quite a lot, and it sort of loops over and under. It keeps it quite loose because you don't want to over tighten it.
Yeah. So I want to get back to mock-ups because that is one of my tips, to always do a mock-up. And if you guys know me and have been following me for a while, and I made the bathing suit top first, right? It was kind of my test. Honestly, because I didn't have enough fabric to make a mock-up that I brought with me. So I was like, well, this is the one I care about less. But I know some people are a fan of making wearable mock-ups. Usually I don't care about that. I did do a mock-up of the bottom half of my swimsuit because I really wanted to make sure that fit, and I'm glad I did because I made some pretty major pattern adjustments, which if you're in my membership, I'll be sharing more next week in our class. But mock-ups, it sounds like it's an extra thing and it's going to take you longer, like, oh, it's like making two garments. But the thing is, it is such a thing that will save you time, especially now if you're using something like what Shelotta said. She used a pattern she had already used, she had proven it, she knew how it fit. Then I won't make a mock-up necessarily, depending on the changes that I'm making. But if I've never done this pattern before, it's a new draft, it's a new design, always make a mock-up, because even though it seems like it's taking longer, it will save you so much time and frustration when you get to the end, to your final. Because like when I went to sew this up, I was like, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. You know, like I didn't have to question the fit the whole time like I did with the other things that I made. So mock-ups is definitely, and then on the flip side of that, not making a mock-up when you're thinking that's going to be a shortcut could actually cause you a lot of pain, because there are just certain things, even if you do like a test fit, when you get to a certain point, you're still only going to be able to make so many adjustments. Like when you do a mock-up, you can make major pattern. Like I took length out of the back of my bottom on my swim pants, which I would not have been able to do. I would have not have been able, it would have been a much harder adjustment to do had I been in final fabric, especially like unpicking zigzag stitches and elastic and everything else and resetting. So that is one big tip I would say for me.
Yeah, I think especially because I used to make so many clothes for my blogs. You get to know what will work and what won't work. But nowadays, where I'm if I'm trying out something new, I always make a mock-up or a 12, just because it's you also, I think, you become more picky. As you know, the more clothes you make, you
it's going into that, mistakes. Like I said, everything I make, I'm like, I would do this next time if I did it different. You would do it differently. So it's good to, then you can. Yeah. Even though you're using the same pattern, you're like, ooh, this kind of bothered me last time I made this, but so I can fix it on this version.
Yes. Yeah. And I think with sewing patterns, you need a 12. Otherwise it's like impossible. But it's quite interesting. I've been reading lots of vintage fitting books, and I think a lot of them don't make mock-ups. But I think it comes from a time where
fitting. The pattern fitting. There's a lot, like the Palmer Plesh method is to actually.
Now I'm talking more like 1930s, 40s, I think. But you always used to have like your mother in the house or something, and you used to have all these allowances to fit it in the fabric, and they had the extra space to move it around, and somebody really knowledgeable to do it. But by yourself, always make a 12. It's just safer.
And on that thread, a tip that I will say, and something that we talked about at the retreat that I want to reiterate, is dress sizes, pant sizes, especially for women, mean nothing. Ignore them. It doesn't mean anything. And absolutely, the dress size or the size that you are in the store, which by the way can vary from company to company. I never pay attention to it.
It can do in company as well.
In company as well.
By supplier.
They are not usually even close to sloper sizes, my sloper sizes, pattern sizes. If you're using a commercial pattern, generally pattern sizing is a larger number than what you are in the store. This is called vanity sizing. There's no standardization for what a size 10, a size 12, a size 18. There's no standardization of what that means across the board in the industry. So if you are going to pick a size in your pattern, always, always, always look at the measurements. Look at the measurements.
I wouldn't even trust the measurements on the tenter envelope. Look at the actual pattern pieces.
Pull out your pattern pieces and measure them and compare them to what you need, because
and you need to, of course, include your ease.
Right.
But sometimes, because I've been now running with trouser sewing pattern course for quite a while, sometimes some of them, you look at the illustration and it looks like a normal fit, and you look at the ease amount, you just think that's going to be massive or far too tight. It's amazing how different all of these sewing patterns are.
Yes, so definitely at least look at the measurements. Ignore the number. It means nothing. I'm telling you, it means absolutely nothing. It's an arbitrary number that people made up to make you feel better about your size, which is weird. But if you're going to look at anything, look at the measurements. But yes, definitely a huge thing to double check. And that is definitely a tip that will save you time, because you could make up something that you think is your size, put it on, and it's completely wrong. And then you're having to refigure it out. So taking that time in the beginning to look and measure your actual pattern pieces will definitely help you.
Yes, no. That's a really good one. I was going to go back to if you're drafting your own clothes rather than using sewing patterns. If you start a draft, one thing I always do, I actually, before I start messing around like designing, I think, oh, what finishes do I need? Do I need a lining? Do I need a facing? Does the facing need, if you do lots of pleated designs at the front, for example, does the facing, is it going to have the pleats or is it going to be flat? And once I've added the pleat, it's going to be really difficult to do a tracing. So you do your necklines first, you do your facings first, your lining, and then you add your design details. And so always think about like, what do you need at the end? And is it easier to get it first before you start designing, or do you need to wait until you've actually changed the design? But sometimes if you get right in designing and you change anything, you think, oh, I really need the facing without
the details.
And now I have no idea. I know I lowered the neckline by roughly 2 centimeters, but yeah, always do it first. And even if you just have it and you don't
about
need
how
it,
your construction is going to be before you get into it. Yeah.
Yes. Rather than just going in. And have you got anything about drafting? I've got 2 more things about drafting.
I do have walking your seams.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is all the seams that sew together. So your front shoulder to your back shoulder, your front side seam to your back side seam, not your center front to your center back. That comes up a lot. But any seams that are going to be sewn together, making sure that those measure the same, because I've done it myself. I know my students, when they learn the lesson, they're like, I didn't do that, and it caused me trouble.
And it's amazingly how that easily can happen if you add any sort of volume. It's like, it's your thing, like, how I measured it, why is it suddenly out?
Yeah, so just checking and walking your seams, like don't
checking your right angles and your curves so they match, all these sort of things.
Yeah, for sure. And then I have kind of a drafting thing, but I think you should tell your next.
To take turns.
Yeah.
But mine is really, well, this one is to, if you're sort of trying to save time, and for example, you had a top with a really visible opening, like a button stand or maybe a center back zip, which you had to get perfect. And you want to make a quick project in your drafting, or before you're cutting out, you can actually think, I don't need a button stand there. I could have a side seam, or you have like a really big detail here, which is really hard to stitch. You can move things like that around at the drafting stage if you're remaking things, and make it easier. It might be hidden if it's, if you're using a fabric where you would have to pattern match, or where it's really tricky to put buttonholes in. Like, feel free to change practical things as well as designs.
Yeah, basically. That's the great thing about making your own patterns, is you are not slave. Even if you're using a pattern that already exists, a commercial pattern, you can change where the opening is. That's always like the first question that I'm asking myself when I'm looking at a new design. Where are we getting into this? A lot of times in theater and costumes, like wrap things, or even button down stuff like that takes a lot of time and dexterity to get right when you're doing something quick backstage. A lot of times we're having to get people into costumes quickly. So we would do a fake wrap, and then you'd have a center back zip, or you'd have a side zip, so that is set exactly perfectly how you want it to, and then we've moved the opening to another place so it looks like that. So, and
actually it's not just, I was just thinking, because I love a wrap dress, but I've just realized I don't like them, because it's never safe. You either have to tie it really tight, or if it's loose, it moves. Like, I hate it when you're constantly having to fidget with designs.
Yeah.
So I now realize whenever I do any style like that, I need to actually change it to a fake and have a button stand or a zip somewhere. Because I made the famous walkaway dress.
Yes.
Where you put it over your head and you tie it the front and back. And I made it as a challenge to, like, made to measure. And I did it. It looked amazing, but you have to tie it so tight. Otherwise, everything collapses. So I'm now changing it to a zip, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
You can change, but it becomes more garment, because one of the things we talked about is ease. Like, when you construct your own garments, you can actually add the ease you want. And I know I like a little bit more ease. So always having a button and a zip rather than a wrap works much better for me.
Yeah.
Oh, and I've got a great short tip in my chat by Yvonne, and she says, and don't have connecting pieces with different seam allowances like I did last week. Yes, that's definitely.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Unless it's a flat felt seam, in which case you want a different seam
Right,
allowance. But otherwise,
right.
yeah,
But
it's
even
worth
with
checking
flat
that as
felt,
well.
I would rather have the same seam allowance and trim while I do it.
Yeah, I think
Because
if
then
I
you have
was
to
making
have,
this on repeat and I knew that was a flat felt seam, then I would have different
true,
seam allowances. But if you make that top every 3 years, definitely just have the same seam
and
allowance
then
because
trim
you're
it
gonna
away.
go do
Yeah.
it and it's gonna be
Yeah.
wrong.
So Kathleen is saying, I now dream of coming to your live classes. So she must be a UK
I would
friend.
love you if you're in Suffolk in the UK.
Yes.
You can join me again in November. That'd be great.
And then she also says, when I'm recycling from sheets or upcycling from sheets, I use the existing edge finishes for the top, from the top of the sheet for the waistband. That's a great idea. I love that.
Yeah, I do it when you're recycling stuff as well, because I make quite a lot of children's clothes and I recycle like jeans or shirts, and there again you can use all the really nice finishes and it saves you lots of time having to do top stitching and stuff like that.
So I wanted to, my drafting tip, and we kind of talked about it, but I didn't know if it quite fit. So there's a few ways to get a pattern, right? Like you can draft from scratch, like our slopers. We can use a sloper and do flat pattern manipulation and get the design that we want. We can use a commercial pattern and change the designs, like for different things, like you said, cutting the neckline. And you can also copy off an existing garment. Copying off an existing garment is probably, I use that a lot and have used it a lot. And it's a great way to get a pattern quickly. I just did 2 examples of this, and I used to do it a lot for clients because I don't have their slopers. I haven't made them stuff before. So even if it wasn't the exact same thing that I was making them, but if I was making them a version of pants, I would ask that, or trousers, I would say, hey, do you have a pair of trousers that fits you well? And even though I would do a mock-up and I would do a fitting on them, at least starting with something that I knew, oh, the kitties are coming. Look at him, he's so cute.
Pets.
Then at least I was starting with something that was kind of close and it wasn't just off of, so I do this a lot. So I just did this for the retreat. I had to wear something white for our pinning ceremony and I'm like, I don't have anything white. I would dirty that in a heartbeat. And then I did find a white dress that I had, but I'm glad that I made this because that white dress needs to be washed and not super clean. But I love this romper. This is a romper that I have that I wear a lot it's a pretty simple pattern. But it's really nice. It fits me well, and I really like it. And so I was like, that's a quick thing. I'm going to copy that pattern. I copied that pattern. It took me about 20 minutes to copy the pattern, and then I made a white version of it, and it was great. And I did it really quickly, because I knew that fit. I did do a mock-up, and I actually have a reel that's doing quite well right now about the dart wasn't pointing in the right direction, but because I didn't make this pattern, I probably didn't even notice that this dart isn't pointing in the right direction, like on the actual garment, so I do still highly recommend you do a mock-up, but this went together really quickly. And it's great when you are copying off something with order of construction, because I use this to know how to put things together. And now I did change some things because I was using eyelet, but I also did that recently with the pants that goes with this top that I just made. So these pants are from Victoria's Secret. I bought them. I like the way they fit, except they were a little long. Like this part looked proportionally strange on my body to me. So I did a fitting. I decided I wanted to lower this seam to this point. So that's why there's safety pins in there. And I also hated the color because doing yoga in white pants is not, I'm always self-conscious. So I always thought I would dye these, but then the fit wasn't exactly perfect. So there was always something a little off. So I copied this pattern. I was doing a lot of other things during that retreat. It didn't take me very long. And then I was able to cut it out. and make my new pair of pants. And now I love these. They're a different color. They match my new top. They fit exactly the way I want them to fit. And they have this like fun little design, split at the ankle, which was nice, which will go into a sewing tip that I have. But copying off a pattern is a great way to start with something to get that fit, to get closer to a fitting thing. Like if something, again, it's going back to that, starting with a pattern that fits you already is going to help you with the fitting of your final garment. Starting with a garment that fits you already and copying off that pattern is going to get you a lot closer than maybe starting with a sloper or something else. We do have a couple of different classes at PatternCon of teachers that are teaching that. I have a class in my membership teaching that. And then there's an excellent book by Claire Louise Hardy that we actually are going to be selling at PatternCon as well, called Clone Your Clothes, where she gives a lot of great techniques on how to do that. So if you don't know how to do that, that is a great skill to have for making your own clothes that can definitely move things a lot quicker when you get into drafting.
I think especially for casual clothes, where it's if you have like a wool jacket with a satin sleeve, I think sleeves are the trickiest bit because you don't quite know how much has been eased in.
Ease, yeah.
But like that romper is perfect, and it's great for trousers as well. If you have well-fitting pair of trousers, just be aware there might be a little bit of easing in.
Right.
But in general, and especially for stretch fabrics, because on stretch fabric you don't generally ease at all.
Right.
So
you can lay it flat. I mean, some garments are going to be easier than others, and that's why if this isn't something, I basically taught myself a lot of that, and that's why I really am a big proponent for, and that's actually how Jennifer Stern and I took her copy off class, and then I was like, have you ever tried this method? And we were like nerding out together, sharing different ways. This book by Claire Louise Hardy, I love it because, and she actually reached out to me when she first was releasing it in the US, and she's, and so I don't talk about things that I wouldn't use myself or back myself, but she really breaks it down into easy, digestible tips on how to copy things off and giving you different methods for sleeves, for copying darts off is another kind of tricky part sometimes on how to do that. And it's a really great method, and it can definitely speed things up. And Sue's saying that's right, she just copied off a pair of pants for her daughter and they were awesome. So it's a really great tip for getting things quickly. And even if they don't fit you perfectly, like I did with these, you can fit the item and then copy off the pattern with that adjustment already in it. And I didn't, again, have time or fabric to do a mock-up with that. I was kind of flashing and mooning the ladies, trying that on. That's another tip too. Like if you don't have time for a full toile or a full mock-up, I would definitely be trying things on as you're putting them together, or pinning your paper together, your pattern together, and kind of doing a little test that way. Anything you can do along the ways before you're finalizing. So that is one of mine. Like, don't skip the fitting. Don't just trust in the numbers or trust in the patterns, especially if you haven't ever made that garment before, that it's going to work, and wait until you're done. You finished everything. You did all the hand sewing. You're like, everything's perfect before you try it on. Do not skip trying it on. You must, I am always trying my stuff on, like, as I'm making it. That is definitely going to help you for sure.
I was going to add one more thing to the cloning or copying clothes. What you can do as well, what I sometimes do, is that if it's something which isn't as straightforward, for example, if there's this dress originally cloned off a dress I bought, but it's all these pleats, which are a little bit difficult to clone around. So what I used my block, which fits me how I want to, and then I measured, I need to add pleats that way, I need to be exactly that measurement and this far apart, and then I just used normal drafting methods I use for that. But again, it's a shortcut where you're basically copying something which works rather than trying to figure out the pleat depth and stuff like that. Anything which saves time, I think, is always good. I'm going to add one last drafting thing, and that's something we talked about with Yvonne. You want to have the same seam allowance on the seam, but you can, for example, if you're doing curves like necklines and armholes, rather than having your normal seam allowance and then clipping it off or snipping it, what you do in industry, you just do a narrow seam allowance, which is
So
even
you
half
don't
a
have to
centimeter
clip,
over
yeah.
width of your foot, which is 7 mils. And that means you can literally just stitch it. And on most fabrics, you won't have to clip or snip it off or trim it off. You can literally just iron it inside out. And that saves some time as well. And it makes it more stable, of course, if you don't clip into it.
And we're saying, my opinion says when I sew, I literally sew in my underwear. Me too.
This is why I always, when I'm making stuff, I think, oh, I should share it. Then I say, yeah, but I'm wearing a pajama. Trousers and a bra.
I know.
It's like, not,
or
like,
getting back to the finishing thing, if I will wait, like I said, I won't put buttons on or whatever, and then I'll be like, oh, I want to wear that. Like this. There was a little hole, like the turning hole that I had to close up. I didn't do that until yesterday when I went to yoga. It'll be like right before I want to wear it, I'm like, oh shoot, I have to do that real fast. And it'll be me in my underwear, like doing it and then putting the thing on right away. Yeah.
And I've got a question about starting your own clothing business, how to start with its own patterns or ready-made pattern. That might be a question. It's quite a big question. It might be a question for another live stream.
What was that question? I'm sorry, I was reading.
It's on mine. Natalie is saying, so to start your clothing business, is it better to create your own patterns for it? Because I don't really know how to go about it. It might be worth to do a live stream about how to, make it as a business. What's the difference between stitching for yourself and making it as a business?
I think what she's I guess patterns and designs in general, right? Because I was gonna say one thing that I is a big thing for me is, starting with slopers, and that this is a big thing that's unique about the way I teach is I don't start by drafting blocks and slopers because that scares people away and it's kind of a harder thing to get right. So you don't have to draft. You don't have to start by drafting. Like I said, you can copy off a garment. I also sell my slopers. So you are welcome to take my slopers and learn how to, fit those or I don't know why I did that, fit those or learn pattern making techniques to make new designs off of those. You don't have to start from scratch, blank sheet of paper to create designs.
I think especially if you're having a clothing business, you're not going to have made to measure blocks. You're going to have the standard size of block, whatever its sizes are, whatever, who they fit, but they're all going to be graded by sizes. So you might start with just one block, which would fit your mannequin or whoever your fit model is.
Right.
And then you could grade it, have it graded up, have it graded down. You could do it yourself as well. So it's slightly different. And I think maybe that'd be worth talking about, what's the difference between making clothes for yourself and making clothes for business.
Kathleen says, several patterns I've bought lately say clearly you cannot use them for making items to sell.
I know. I find that really interesting because there's lots of even high street companies and stuff. I think, that technique I've seen it used before and stuff in a book and things. So I guess it's sort of, you can't copy them, but quite often a lot of labels use them as a starting point.
I know that for sewing patterns, because I've run into this a lot as well, it has to be changed 20%. It's really hard to copyright a design.
And also the weird thing is, of course, that most sewing patterns, I've been in the fashion industry for 20 years, most sewing patterns aren't original. Right. They're copies of something else. So I think it has to be,
So I think that is intellectual property. Yeah, it's more, especially if it's a small business, like it's an independent pattern design, but legally, and I'm not, please, disclaimer, I am not a lawyer. I don't know these things. Please take this with a grain of salt. What I have heard is as long as you change it by 20% legally, you are okay to use that. I mean, that's why knockoff Gucci bags and knockoff garments are allowed to exist, that they can't be stopped because there's no recourse for them. So I think it's more out of being kind and respecting that pattern's wishes and that intellectual property for that pattern company. So I do understand that. The bathing suit company that I made these tops from said that as well. That her rule was you can use these patterns to create things to sell, but only for small companies. And it was, she asked that if you were sending them out to a factory, or if you were not sewing them in-house, you had more than 3 employees, I think, so it's all laid out, then
I think that's really fair, because that is a really big issue. Is like,
right,
like Shine or Temu, they're ripping off
right,
designs, and then both from new designers, sewing patterns design, and knitwear designers, I think have a massive issue with that as well, isn't it?
so
So
yeah,
I totally think that's fair.
Sue's
Whether you
asking,
can reinforce it, because I actually worked for a company, and we we sold at that point really expensive bags. So the bags were about £1,000, so 1,000 something dollars, and a high street company ripped a bag completely off, and we took them to court, and we won. But it cost us it took years, and it cost money, and then we're not going to do a bag again, but it's 2 years later and nobody's wearing that bag anymore, so yeah. So yeah, I think it's just to be mindful, isn't it? If it's a really small sewing pattern designer, then
but that is, and the reason that they put those rules in is it protects the person who put in the time to actually make those things, make the garments, make the patterns.
But if you would buy like I think a vintage, Vogue or a McCall sewing pattern, I think, and change a bit things, but it's like your own design.
Like I said, I had always heard the rule, in answer to your question, Sue, is you have to change it 20% to legally.
Yeah, I think, it's like 3 things you have to change in the UK.
Yeah.
3 things have to be different. But we're not lawyers.
yes, please do your own research if you are planning on using things.
Okay, I have something not a shortcut when it comes to construction, and that is ironing. Just so basically, this is not for knitted fabric, because this was a remnant fabric, and it's like some polyester with amazing stretch. It cost £6, so nice. This was like an amazing dress, and I could see I didn't need to iron it. But if you're working in cotton and linen, any woven fabric, just to press or iron as you go along, as long as it's flat. So don't make the whole top and then iron it, because it will be much harder to get into everything beautifully. So it's a bit of a pain to get up, but the more you iron after each step, the easier it is, because once you've done your whole garment, it's going to be really hard to stitch. Sure. And to iron. So what I do is I do piecework. So I do as much as I can flat. Then I take everything up, I iron it, and then I do the next step. And I think that brings us to our next shortcut, which is about instructions and order of constructions.
Yes. I have that on mine too. So always read the instructions. Generally, I don't follow them as they are instructed, but I always read them, because I want to know how the pattern maker was intending it to be put together. And then I can decide whether, because I like to do things differently for adjustability, which is what I've learned in theater, or I may add extra seam allowances for that kind of thing. So I might change the order and how I'm doing something, but I always like to know how they intended us to do it before I go and change things, because that can because I'll tell you, with the bathing suit top, the one with the narrower thing that she explains, which I didn't read clearly enough, that how to do it for this, you do it in one way, and how to do it for the narrower ones, you can't do it that way. And I was trying to do it this way for that one, and I had to take it out like 3 times. And then I was like, oh, I can do it another way. And then that didn't work. And so I was ripping out serging like 3 times on my bathing suit top before I actually finished it. But yeah. And that's because I didn't read my instructions well enough and thought I knew better. And
I think it's sort of read through them, but feel free to disregard them, because it's so amazing. Right. Each company does things differently. Some of them are really good, and some have now photos or videos, but some are like make things really complicated. Where you just think, I've never done it. It's just going to take far too much time.
Yeah. Or there's an easier way to do
if it's like pleats and things and done in a certain way. Just be aware, as Tisha said, otherwise it causes pain. But because I don't come I never learned from sewing pattern instructions. I think you just learn by making it again in the clothes for years and getting it right.
And also I like looking
Yes,
at ready
that's what I
to
was
wear
gonna
stuff.
say.
Yeah.
Whenever I make a zipper for trousers, I just look at the zipper I have.
Right.
As a short, how is it done? Whenever you look at clothes, look how different construction methods. I think that's how you learn different methods which work well for you, something to try out. But I also think sometimes, I think a lot of sewing pattern companies are great, but sometimes you sort of think you haven't really thought that through, or that's maybe they're you doing, which might be too complicated because it works for you. So I think by seeing how clothes are made for the fashion industry, which is always the fastest, most efficient, or in your case for costume, it has like fitability and stuff like that.
It has different.
Look at stuff like that and see how you can change it to work for you.
Yeah. I want to go back for that, and we're out of time. There were a couple things I wanted to share quickly, but who is it? Made in Harlem asked if you want to clone a piece that is a knit fabric, but you want to use it for woven fabric instead. That is going to get very tricky because knit fabric has stretch, so it is not going to have the same. It depends. Like if I copied this and tried to make it out of a woven, it is not going to fit because I need that stretch to cover what it needs to cover.
Negative ease, isn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, you could use it as a starting point, but I would absolutely add lots of seam allowance and do a fitting, because unless it's an oversized, and even still though, because there is the stretch changes things and makes things act differently.
Same if you change things from woven to stretch.
Correct.
It look more oversized most of the time when it isn't woven.
Right. And then you take it in. So there was a couple of things that I wanted to share about quickly. One of them is kind of a drafting and a sewing thing, but I'll do this one first since we're talking about knits. And so the only thing I didn't do on my pants at the retreat, because I didn't bring this machine, but I have a cover stitch machine. So I waited to do the hem because look how nice and pretty, and it took like 5 seconds. But whenever I'm doing stuff with knits, and this is something that I always have on hand with me if I'm doing a show, especially if it's circus and I'm doing a lot of stretch, is Steam a Seam 2 or Stitch Witchery. This stuff will save you so much sanity. So it is it's a fusible glue, basically. So you get this off, and I'm going to do a reel about it. I just didn't get it together enough today. But it has a little bit, the reason I like this company in general is it has a little bit of sticky. So like it stays on your fabric, and then you iron it, and it's really on there. But you put this down, you iron it, you take the second layer of paper off, and that's what I did with my hem, and then I fold up my hem and then iron that. This is glued in place instead of pins, and especially when you're doing a cover stitch, if you're lucky to have a cover stitch machine, you're sewing from the right side, so you're not seeing what's happening underneath. So this stuff, I always have it. It's like they should.
And it's great if it's slightly sticky, because that's always a pain otherwise, but it stays in place.
Yeah, so that's what I like about this company in particular, is that I know there's Heat Bond and there's other Stitch Witcheries and things, but
yes, lots of them.
And this also comes in sheets, like for appliques and things, but it is something I always have on hand. So definitely worth getting that. It will save you a lot of time and frustration when you're sewing knits and doing hems and things like t-shirt hems, things like that. Even if you're doing a zigzag stitch and you're not doing a cover stitch, it definitely helps with that. The other thing I wanted to say is on my patterns, and my students know this because this is how I teach them, and this is how I was learned in fashion, is when you're marking a dart, you know, you have your dart. Oh my God, why am I drawing this upside down? That doesn't help. So let's say a bodice, right? And let's pretend there's seam allowance on this, just for time's sake. But whenever I'm marking a dart on my pattern, I mark it with a punch hole at the dart point, and I mark it with a notch at each of the dart legs, like this, right? And so when I mark my fabric, I just mark the point and I mark the notches. The reason that I do that is let's pretend I have So let's pretend this is my bodice, right? I only mark that because what that tells me is these two notches go together, and then it goes, I'm going to sew to the point. So now, as I'm used to sewing this, so I know that I'm just going to stitch a straight line like that. You can also, with your ruler, draw that straight line in. And then another tip that I do that I use all the time about doing things quickly is with carbon paper, which is another way to mark your darts or mark other things that are transferred onto your paper. So when I'm marking, usually you have a left and a right side. I put them together, with, it works better if you have wrong sides together. So you can just slip it in between like this. And then you can take your, where the carbon paper is folded, and then you can like mark your dart that way, and then you're marking both pieces at the same time, right? So that is something that I always do. That's a quick tip. And if you have right sides together, then you fold it the other way like this. It's just harder to see, what you're marking, but you can put the pattern on top. But that is something I use all the time instead of marking the left side and then the right side.
One of the things I was going to say with darts, because some people do all this stitching to mark it and stuff like that, I've always just pinned it. I don't even use a pen because I think for certain fabric that ends up
right.
But I've always
like
it's
pin,
2 notches and the pin in the center. And the thing is, one of those things when you come from industry, but you never. I think a lot of the couture methods, if you learn that way, they are more precise, and in probably 5% of the cases, they're better, but in 95% of the cases, you can get away with just notching the end. And of course, that also applies that your darts are straight.
Correct.
Rather than curved.
So. Well, and if they are curved, then the carbon method is the better way to go for sure. Or if you're marking like a stitch line or anything like that.
Question: do you always wash your fabrics before you use them? Yeah, so I either wash them or I iron steam them. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't skip that step. You sort of often I just iron them. I don't always wash them.
For me,
it depends on the fabric.
It depends on the fabric, and it depends how I'm going to launder it in the end. Yeah. If I'm going to put it in the washing machine, I will wash it on hot and put it in the dryer, and I want it to shrink as much as it will shrink as possible. And but if it's spandex, I don't usually worry about it because it doesn't usually change a whole lot in washing, so I didn't pre-wash this. And if it's something that I know I'm only going to dry clean or hand wash, even hand washing, if I hand wash, I usually would block it. But if I know I'm only going to dry clean it or I'm never going to wash it in the washer where it would shrink, then I wouldn't, but that's rare. I would say for most wovens, I am pre-washing.
Well, I would say, for example, because of course if you buy any clothes in the shops, they have never been pre-washed. And now I think
that's why I hate it, because so many times I buy pants, I'm like, ooh, they're just long enough, and then I wash them and I have high waters.
But I think it used to be more of an issue. I don't think it's an issue nowadays as much, because nowadays you can put cashmere in the washing machine, it doesn't shrink. Mm-hmm. But I remember like linen shrinking. And because the one thing is, for example, if you wash your linen, that's gonna lose that sheen. So quite often something like that, if you just if you have your steam iron on the hottest setting, mm-hmm. and you just iron it, that will
it'll shrink
normally take care of it. But it depends how hot you wash. And I think I don't have a dryer, so I've never dried things. That might make things worse.
I just dry
lines over here.
Well, and I just want to add this for this part: washing and laundering your clothes does more damage than anything else. So if you can wear your item a couple of times, wash it as little as possible, because that is where spot clean, that is where a lot of damage happens, is in the laundry. But because I have had so many pants, especially that I love, trousers that I love, shrink by washing them. I only will put in the dryer certain pants that I know for a fact are not going to shrink, or I'm like, they're long already anyway. But I rarely dry my pants because I am like paranoid about them. But if I made them, I put the fabric in the washer, turn it on. I always wash my clothes in cold, But when I'm pre-washing, I wash it in like the hottest setting, and then I put it in the dryer because I want it to shrink as much as it can possibly shrink in that mode, so that I'm starting with it as tiny as it's going to get. Hopefully that's my hope anyway.
Yeah, it sort of all depends on the fabric, doesn't it? Because
Yeah.
I've noticed, even because you said like with knit fabrics, but I've noticed board t-shirts, cotton t-shirts
T-shirts will.
They shrink.
Yeah.
And they didn't used to, so I think it's like cheaper
Yeah.
cotton or something.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's like where things change as well, don't they?
Yeah.
And they shrink by about this much.
A lot.
You think like, that's really
It's
bad.
a lot. Yeah, it's true. Well, I think that was, as always, it blows by. We're always like, do we have enough to talk about? But you guys come to us with great stuff too, so thank you for adding into that.
Yes. No, it was lovely to hear all your information, different ways of throwing it. No, it's always great to see the chat. I try to look at both chats.
Yeah,
at the same
I know.
time. It's always interesting.
You're better than I on that. Well, but thank you guys so much for joining us. Charlotta and I will talk about next one's coming up.
August,
I don't think we've planned anything, but we'll talk about that. But usually we do this towards the end of the month, and we like
Thursdays.
to have this on Thursdays, same time, same day at around 3 p.m. Eastern time or 8 p.m. UK. And then what is the Greenwich? Is GM the other one?
Greenwich Mean Time.
Greenwich
basically
Mean Time is an hour.
The center.
Hour later, right? Of course. So yes, come back and join us. I know that I have Charlotta tagged down there if you're on my channel.
In my description.
Yeah,
well.
and Charlotta has mine. We love to share and talk about all this stuff, and we hope that it helps you in your sewing and pattern making journey. So we will see you on the next one. All right, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
Bye bye, everybody. Lovely to speak